There's a silent epidemic no one wants to name. Men are quitting. Not in loud rebellion, but in quiet retreat. They're opting out of effort. In relationships, in ambition, in emotional life. The spark that once drove them to chase, build, impress, and protect has dimmed to a tired flicker. They haven't stopped caring, they've stopped believing it matters. Society calls it laziness, women call it detachment, but beneath both labels lies exhaustion disguised as indifference. He doesn't slam doors or announce his withdrawal. He simply stops showing up in ways that used to define him. The man who once tried too hard now barely tries at all. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most men don't stop because they're weak. They stop because they're unseen. The world only applauds male effort when it benefits someone else. Perform, provide, prove, repeat. When the applause fades, the instinct to keep performing dies with it. Over time, his drive erodes not from lack of strength, but from emotional malnutrition. Every compliment he ever got was about results, not existence. When effort stops being rewarded, the male brain quietly turns off the tap. He learns that trying is dangerous. It leads to disappointment, to mockery, to failure. So he builds a new kind of armor, apathy. It's safer to not care than to care and fall short. The tragedy is that behind every man who stopped trying is someone who once tried too hard and got burned for it. He didn't run out of energy, he ran out of oxygen. And the most painful part, no one noticed the moment he went silent. The mechanism behind why men stop trying is simple but devastating. Learned futility. It's the same psychological principle that breaks wild horses and silences bright children. Try enough times without reward, and the brain concludes that effort is pointless. In relationships, it shows up when every gesture is criticized, every attempt to lead is corrected, every vulnerability is mocked as weakness. At work, it looks like endless expectations with no acknowledgement. In life, it feels like running a marathon with no finish line. Over time, the male nervous system learns to protect itself the only way it knows how: by numbing. It's not depression at first, it's emotional callous. The man who used to dream now doesn't see the point. The man who once loved grand gestures now calls romance cringe. He's not cold, he's conditioned. Effort used to equal respect. Now, effort equals exposure. The cultural pendulum swung from expecting too much of men to pretending we don't need them at all, and somewhere in that swing, the male instinct to strive got shamed into submission. The mechanism that once rewarded performance now punishes it. A man who tries risks being labeled controlling, needy, or outdated, so he stops risking. The paradox is tragic. Women say they want initiative, leadership, drive. But when men sense that effort no longer earns admiration, they default to neutrality. Learned futility teaches them that peace comes from withdrawal. But peace bought through apathy isn't peace, it's decay. The mechanism can be reversed, but not with pressure or guilt. The antidote isn't demanding more effort, it's rebuilding the belief that effort still matters. It starts subtly. He forgets to plan date nights, not because he doesn't care, but because he's tired of the sigh that follows when the restaurant isn't quite right. He used to initiate conversations about the future. Now he answers in one-word replies. She thinks he's disinterested, but in his head he's replaying every past argument where trying only made things worse. At work, his boss compliments the team but never him, so he stops volunteering ideas. Why bother? Becomes his silent mantra. Even friendships fade. He cancels plans, texts less, avoids showing enthusiasm. The man who once led the charge now blends into the background, invisible even to himself. Another man tries harder, thinking effort will fix what's broken. He takes on extra tasks, bends further, gives more. But instead of appreciation, he's met with expectation. His generosity turns into a job description no one offered to pay for. Resentment builds like plaque. Eventually, he joins the others in quiet rebellion, where detachment feels like survival. And then there's the partner who doesn't understand the shift. She sees a man who's stopped trying and mistakes it for indifference, not realizing that it's exhaustion from trying without impact. Every man who stops has a different trigger, but the pattern is universal. Somewhere along the line, effort stopped earning meaning. It's not that he lost ambition. It's that ambition lost its reward. His silence isn't apathy, it's protest. Not the loud kind that demands to be heard, but the quiet kind that says, You won't notice me until I'm gone. Biologically, men are wired to find meaning through impact. For thousands of years, their survival depended on usefulness. Hunt, build, protect, provide. That instinct still exists, only now it's trapped in a modern world that no longer rewards the effort it was designed for. Psychologically, effort is linked to dopamine. The brain's pleasure chemical spikes not from success, but from pursuit. When effort no longer leads to visible reward, when pursuit meets indifference, the dopamine circuit breaks. The result is apathy disguised as calm. He's not lazy. His brain is simply conserving energy for a game it believes is rigged. Add to this the cultural script that equates male emotion with weakness, and you get a perfect storm of suppression. Men are praised for stoicism but punished for vulnerability, told to open up, and then mocked when they do. The nervous system adapts. It shuts down feedback loops that once fueled motivation. This is why so many men say they feel numb or flat. It's not depression at first, it's protection. The body learns that striving leads to pain, so it prioritizes stillness over risk. Socially, the shift compounds. Masculinity used to be validated through contribution. Now it's often treated with suspicion. The biological need to serve collides with a psychological fear of being unappreciated, and the brain chooses safety over significance. But here's the twist. The same mechanism that causes withdrawal can also rebuild purpose. Dopamine doesn't care what triggers it. It only needs momentum. When a man finds meaning again, through challenge, recognition, or love that values effort, the chemistry reignites. The antidote to male apathy isn't pressure or pity, it's purpose. Give a man a reason to matter, and his biology remembers how to try. The signs that a man is starting to give up don't arrive like a breakdown. They arrive like a fade-out. They're small, quiet, and easy to miss until they're irreversible. The first sign is emotional minimalism. He talks less, not out of secrecy, but self-defense. Every word feels like ammunition that might be used against him later. The second is selective effort. He only tries where effort still feels seen: work, hobbies, or the gym. The third is disengaged listening. He hears but doesn't register, nodding through conversations as if his presence alone counts as participation. The fourth is micro-withdrawal. Less eye contact, fewer questions, more scrolling. The fifth is humor turned hollow. His jokes sound fine, but the spark behind them is gone. The sixth is avoidance disguised as peace. He insists he doesn't want to argue, but what he really means is he's too tired to fight for understanding. The seventh is purpose fatigue. He stops setting goals, not because he's unmotivated, but because he can't remember why they mattered. The eighth is defensive resignation. He says things like, "You're right, whatever," and "I don't care anymore." That's not surrender, it's depletion. The ninth is invisible despair. The quiet nights, the endless scrolling, the beer he drinks slower than he used to because silence is the only thing that doesn't demand anything back. By the time these signs appear, he's not choosing apathy. He's surviving it. Men don't stop trying overnight. They erode, gesture by gesture, until even effort feels humiliating. The tragedy is that everyone around him notices too late. The warning signs weren't invisible. They were inconvenient. And in a world that expects men to stay strong no matter how unseen they feel, quitting starts to look a lot like peace. Not every man who fades away stays gone. The men who come back don't do it because someone begged them to. They do it because something finally reached them where words couldn't. The first countersignal is recognition. Not praise, not pity. Recognition. Someone sees his effort without attaching conditions to it. A simple, "I noticed what you did," can light up neural pathways that haven't fired in years. The second is autonomy. When men are given trust instead of supervision, their sense of competence reawakens. Micromanagement kills motivation. Respect revives it. The third is safe vulnerability. When a man risks opening up and isn't mocked or dismissed, his nervous system recalibrates. He starts to associate honesty with connection instead of danger. Slowly, he re-enters the world. He jokes more. He listens again. He starts volunteering small acts of initiative, testing whether it's still safe to care. Resilience looks understated. It's the man fixing the thing without being asked, showing up on time again, setting goals that no one else will clap for. But real resilience also means rewriting his inner definition of strength. He learns that silence isn't stoicism and that numbness isn't peace. The men who recover learn to try again for themselves, not for applause. They find meaning not in being needed, but in being alive. What revives effort isn't pressure, it's purpose. It's knowing his energy builds something real. For partners and society alike, the challenge is simple. Stop confusing gratitude with indulgence. When men feel safe to be human, they remember that effort isn't a transaction. It's a language. The moment trying becomes meaningful again, they stop retreating and start rebuilding. The forces that make men stop trying don't appear as villains, they wear the mask of modern life. The first antagonist is cultural noise, a society that both demands and dismisses masculinity. Men are told to be protectors, then mocked for being patriarchal, to be vulnerable, then rejected for being too emotional. The rules change faster than the explanations, and eventually effort feels like walking through a minefield. The second is constant comparison. Social media makes success look effortless, while real progress feels like crawling. Every scroll whispers that someone younger, richer, or louder is doing it better. The male ego, built on competence, quietly fractures under invisible competition. The third is performance fatigue. Men live on stage, rewarded for producing, punished for pausing. There's no safe space for uncertainty. So they fake confidence until the mask hardens into apathy. The fourth amplifier is emotional illiteracy. Generations of men were raised to solve, not feel. When problems can't be fixed, they disengage. They don't know how to sit in emotion. They only know how to escape it. The fifth is shifting value systems. In a culture that prizes attention over integrity, quiet consistency goes unnoticed. He watches louder, less grounded men thrive in dating, business, even social media, and concludes that substance no longer wins. The final antagonist is isolation disguised as independence. Men were taught that needing no one is the highest form of strength, but it's really a slow form of starvation. Connection requires humility, and humility has been framed as weakness. These amplifiers work together until withdrawal becomes logical, but logic can be rewritten. When the world stops rewarding men only for what they produce and starts valuing who they are, the amplifiers lose their volume. Until then, silence will keep sounding like safety. When men stop trying, the world doesn't collapse overnight. It just quietly dulls. Relationships lose warmth, workplaces lose innovation, families lose leadership, and society loses energy it doesn't even realize it depended on. The first consequence is emotional entropy. Without initiative, connection flatlines. Partners start mistaking stillness for stability, not realizing they're drifting into distance. The home becomes polite but cold, efficient but empty. The second is generational. Sons learn withdrawal before they learn communication. Daughters grow up thinking emotional unavailability is normal. A father's silence doesn't just affect his partner, it shapes how his children understand love. The third is existential. A man who stops trying becomes invisible not only to others, but to himself. He starts ghosting his own potential, convincing himself that mediocrity is maturity. The mind tells him he's peaceful. The body knows he's decaying. The fourth consequence is social. When too many men disengage at once, the culture loses polarity. There's no drive to build, no hunger to improve. Ambition starts to look outdated, and cynicism passes for intelligence. The final consequence is personal. When a man gives up on effort, he loses the one thing that kept him alive, the feedback loop between purpose and pride. The absence of striving doesn't bring peace. It brings disconnection from the masculine instinct to create, protect, and lead. And yet no one claps when he finally breaks, because no one noticed when he began to fade. The tragedy isn't just what he loses, it's what everyone else loses with him. A world without male effort is quieter, but it's not better. It's a world without rhythm, without risk, without fire. And fire, when neglected long enough, doesn't explode, it goes out. Reversing male apathy doesn't start with motivation. It starts with meaning. You can't guilt a man back into effort, you have to give him a reason to believe effort still matters. Agency begins the moment he realizes withdrawal isn't protection, it's paralysis. The first act of reversal is ownership, admitting that while the world may have dulled his fire, it's still his to reignite. The second is purpose recalibration. He stops chasing applause and starts chasing alignment, doing things that feel true rather than impressive. When men shift from proving to creating, they come back to life. The third is vulnerability. Not the performative kind, but the quiet kind that says, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm willing to learn. Vulnerability invites connection, and connection reawakens drive. Agency grows when a man stops asking, what do they expect? And starts asking, what do I value? The fourth step is self-respect through discipline. Small victories, getting fit, building something, finishing what he starts, restore the biochemical loop between effort and reward. The final stage is relational repair. When men feel seen for who they are rather than what they provide, the instinct to contribute resurfaces naturally. He doesn't need permission to lead. He needs partnership that recognizes his humanity. The truth is, trying isn't about ego, it's about existence. Every man is built to move towards something. When he forgets that, he dies standing up. But when he remembers, when he takes responsibility not just for results but for presence, everything around him begins to move again. The world doesn't need perfect men. It needs engaged ones. Effort isn't masculine or feminine. It's human. And men remembering that truth might just be what saves both. In the end, when men stop trying, it is not failure. It is feedback. It is the system saying something is broken. The reward, the respect, the reciprocity. Quitting is not the solution. It is the warning light on the dashboard. Most men do not want to stop caring. They just do not want to feel foolish for doing so. The fix is not louder pressure, but clearer purpose. Effort without meaning becomes exhaustion, and exhaustion hardens into apathy. A man does not need a parade, but he does need to feel impact. He needs to see that showing up still changes something, even if it is small. When effort lands, drive returns. When effort is ignored, the engine stalls. Recognition is not flattery. It is fuel. Respect is not worship. It is oxygen. Purpose is not hype. It is direction. Reversal begins with ownership. He admits the fade, names the habit, and chooses the next honest action, not the perfect one. He takes back the basics: sleep, strength, craft, and focus. He sets one promise to himself each morning and keeps it without witnesses. He practices presence in the places that matter, at the table, at the job, in the mirror. He speaks plainly about needs instead of burying them under jokes or silence. He asks, listens, adjusts, and lets the scoreboard build slowly. For partners, the work is different but simple. Notice, invite, and allow. Notice what he gives without turning it into duty. Invite initiative instead of assigning it. Allow vulnerability without using it later as leverage. Men are not revived by nagging. They are revived by meaning. Give effort a clear aim and a safe landing, and the old fire remembers its shape. If you are one of those men, start again today with one measurable act and tell someone what it is. If you are with one of those men, ask him tonight what would make his effort feel worthwhile again, then listen all the way to the end. The world moves when men do. What is the next move you want to see?